Welcome to a new journey through history. Today we will explore a place shrouded in mystery and often misunderstood, the medieval harem. Forget the stereotypical images of the movies. The reality was much more complex and fascinating. In the meantime, subscribe to the channel if you are passionate about these historical curiosities, and leave a like on the video. Now let's start. Life behind the forbidden doors of the harem. Have you ever wondered what it was really like to live in a harem? Perhaps you imagine an idyllic setting with beautiful women spending their days among 1,001 nights of pleasure, relaxation, and carefreeness. Right? The reality, however, is quite different. The word harem etymologically derives from terms meaning secret or forbidden. And speaking of prohibitions, it was extremely common for Ottoman harems to follow very strict protocols. Contrary to popular belief, the women who inhabited these spaces exercised considerable influence over the social life of the palace and could even make crucial decisions, even life or death ones. It is essential to abandon the stereotypical image of paradise gardens, where dozens of odalisques offered themselves voluntarily to the Sultan between zithers and pleasures in old Istanbul. During the height of the mighty Ottoman Empire, the harem was in reality a space of rigorous prayer, iron discipline, and severe punishments, which could even lead to execution. The harem represented the domestic and private section of the Sultan's residences. During the reign of Sultan Mehmed III, between 1566 and 1633, the sumptuous Topkapi Palace in Istanbul housed about 1,000 women. Their main goal was to produce the heir to an immense empire which stretched across 3 continents. Founded in the 11th century, during the late Middle Ages by Osman Finas, the Ottoman Empire spread Islam throughout Anatolia, present-day Turkey, eventually conquering Constantinople, the Christian stronghold of the East, in the pivotal year of 1453. The women were carefully selected for their exceptional qualities, both physical and intellectual. Prisoners of war, citizens of the empire, or from border territories, all with the aim of becoming refined courtesans. The youngest were introduced into the harem to receive a rigorous education, and depending on their abilities, could rise in rank to become kaf or uste, that is, supervisors and teachers. Those who became companions of the Sultan obtained a dynastic status with a hierarchical path that could culminate in the title of favorite, fortunate or Caden, wife or consort. The Kadın were the closest to power. There could be 4 of them in total, followed by the lucky ones and then the favorites. The highest rank, however, was that of the Valide Sultan, mother of the future reigning Sultan. Despite their privileges, contact with the outside world was little or non-existent. Typically, these women were brought into the harem against their will, essentially becoming slaves, subjected to an institutionalized system. The management of the harem was almost always entrusted to the Valide Sultan, who held absolute power. No woman could enter or leave without her permission. It could decide the fate, life or death, of each resident based on the infractions committed. The Sultan's mother also regulated her son's relationships with his wives and children, and thus held great political power. Architecturally, the harem was a sumptuous space. The center was a pavilion built around a large courtyard with a pool and garden, where women could relax and contemplate. The courtyard served as a common space for reading, prayers, and shared stories. Despite being a golden cage, there were private rooms for the Sultan, and over 400 rooms for rest, recreation, and daily life. The Imperial Harem housed many figures: the Sultan's official wives, his mother, daughters, female relatives, and servants. The eunuchs kept constant watch to prevent any improper behavior. Even the male children of the Sultan resided there until they were 12 years old, at which age they left the harem to be considered adults. No man outside the Sultan was allowed to enter, so the harem was guarded by eunuchs, castrated men who, although male, did not pose a sexual threat. The Ottoman belief was that a normal man would not be able to control himself among so many women. Eunuchs were trained in the palace, supervising the harem until they became chief eunuchs, or master of the maidens, with a central role in the life of women at court. They were the second most trusted figure for the Sultan after the Grand Vizier, the highest state authority. Not all women in the harem were slaves. Some were legitimate wives who voluntarily accepted the marriage. They lived with the Sultan's concubines, a situation that could create tensions at night, but there were no alternatives. The women of the harem had to live together and find a balance in their complex relationships. Becoming a harem woman required more than just beauty. One had to undergo a rigorous education, learning art, behavior, confidence, and charm. In practice, the harem functioned as a women's academy, where young women were educated to integrate into the court and the rigid social order. The women of the Ottoman Imperial Harem became famous for their extraordinary beauty and culture. Coming from different regions, they often possessed remarkable literary and linguistic knowledge. I hope you enjoyed this journey through history. As we have seen, the life of women in harems was far from idyllic. For many, the existence of slavery was a harsh and dark reality. Through this study, we were able to discover a reality very different from the idealized and stereotyped one that is often associated with Ottoman harems. They were not simply places of pleasure and relaxation, but complex spaces where rigid rules, severe discipline, and a well-defined social structure regulated every aspect of the lives of the women who lived there. These women, many of whom arrived against their will, lived in a condition of isolation and subjection, but at the same time, they could exercise considerable power. Especially the most influential figures such as the Valide Sultana, the Sultan's mother, who authoritatively managed the life of the palace and internal relations. The harem was therefore a true institution, a microcosm that reflected the political, social, and cultural dynamics of the Ottoman Empire. It was not only a gilded prison, but also a place of education, where young women were educated not only in art and culture, but also in the complex rules of power and survival in an often hostile environment. This system represents a fundamental aspect for understanding Ottoman history and society, as well as the role of women in royal courts. That's all for today. And what do you think about harem? Let me know below in the comments. Your opinion is very important to me and to support the channel. See you next time. Bye.